Joshua's journey as a leader did not begin with power or military strength. It began with faith. Long before he stepped into Moses' shoes, Joshua was already known as a man who trusted God with all his heart. While others panicked in the wilderness, when resources were scarce and hope seemed far away, Joshua stood firm. He didn't let fear control him. He remembered the miracles God had done for the Israelites, the parting of the Red Sea, the manna from heaven, and the cloud that guided them by day. Those weren't just stories to him. They were proof that God was real and faithful. This foundation of belief gave him the courage to see beyond the physical. Where others saw giants and fortified cities, Joshua saw opportunities for God to work. His faith wasn't blind. It was built on experience and trust. It made him different. He didn't just survive the desert, he thrived in it. As a result, people started noticing Joshua not just for his skill with the sword or his ability to plan ahead, but for his spirit. Young men looked up to him, and elders sought his advice. He had something rare, a deep, quiet strength that came from knowing he wasn't leading alone. God was with him. That inner conviction gave him a unique kind of peace, even when chaos surrounded him. He wasn't perfect. He had his doubts like any other person, but instead of hiding them or giving in to fear, he brought them to God. He prayed. He reflected. He kept showing up. That kind of steady faith became the backbone of his leadership. It allowed him to keep going, even when the future looked uncertain. In many ways, Joshua's greatest victories weren't on the battlefield, they were in his heart. He won by trusting. That trust gave him strength, clarity, and purpose, and it helped the nation of Israel stay focused on their calling. Joshua's example speaks powerfully to us today. We all go through our own deserts, times when everything feels uncertain, when we're tempted to give up. Maybe it's a job loss, a broken relationship, or just feeling lost in life. Joshua teaches us that those moments are exactly when we need to hold on tighter to our faith. It's easy to believe when everything is going well, but real faith shows up when life feels like it's falling apart. Joshua didn't wait for perfect conditions to believe, he chose to believe in the middle of the storm, and that choice changed everything. His story reminds us that leadership is not about having all the answers or being the strongest person in the room. It's about staying faithful. It's about choosing to trust day after day, even when you don't see the full picture. That kind of faith doesn't just carry us through hard times, it inspires everyone around us. Just like Joshua lit the path for the Israelites, we too can become a source of strength and hope for others, simply by holding on to what matters most. Joshua didn't become a leader overnight. His rise wasn't sudden or accidental. It was the result of years of faithful service, quiet observation, and preparation under Moses' guidance. For decades, Joshua had walked closely beside Moses, witnessing firsthand how the great leader carried the weight of an entire nation. He saw Moses pray, lead, struggle, and make tough decisions. Joshua wasn't just learning how to give orders or lead troops into battle. He was learning the heart of a servant leader. He listened, he asked questions, and he paid attention to how Moses dealt with the people and, more importantly, how Moses responded to God. That kind of mentorship left a deep mark on Joshua's character. So when the time came for a new leader to be chosen, it wasn't a surprise that God chose him. The people already knew him as Moses' assistant, but now God was calling him into something far greater. And because Joshua had already spent years learning, he was ready to step into that role with humility and strength. But stepping into Moses' place wasn't easy. Moses wasn't just any leader. He was the one who brought Israel out of Egypt, who spoke directly to God, who performed miracles. Filling those shoes must have felt overwhelming. Joshua might have felt fear, self-doubt, or the pressure to live up to impossible expectations. But that's exactly when God spoke directly to him, offering reassurance that changed everything. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you, God told him, Joshua 1:5. Those words weren't just comforting, they were empowering. They reminded Joshua that leadership wasn't about doing things alone. It was about walking in partnership with God. That promise gave him the courage to move forward. And it wasn't just a private conversation. Moses publicly affirmed Joshua as the next leader, laying his hands on him in front of all Israel. That act was more than symbolic. It was a spiritual passing of the torch, a moment that showed the nation that Joshua had not only Moses' blessing, but also God's approval. The transition of leadership between Moses and Joshua offers a powerful reminder about the value of preparation and the importance of mentorship. Joshua was trusted with great responsibility, not because of one impressive act, but because of a lifetime of faithfulness. That's a lesson many of us need today. Whether it's in our work, families, or communities, we often want quick results or immediate recognition, but true leadership is built slowly through patience, consistency, and trust. Joshua's example challenges us to ask ourselves, are we preparing for the roles we one day hope to take on? Are we learning from those who've walked before us? Just like Joshua had Moses, we all need people in our lives who challenge and guide us. And when the moment comes when God calls us into something bigger, we'll realize we weren't being overlooked or forgotten. We were being prepared. Joshua teaches us that leadership rooted in preparation, humility, and faith is not only effective, it's transformative. Joshua's leadership was not marked by clever strategies or superior weapons. It was defined by obedience. From the moment he stepped into his role as Israel's leader, Joshua made it clear that he would follow God's instructions, no matter how unusual or difficult they seemed. One of the most powerful examples of this was the Battle of Jericho. God didn't tell Joshua to storm the city or build siege weapons. Instead, he gave a command that sounded almost ridiculous. March around the city once a day for 6 days, then 7 times. On the 7th day, blow trumpets and shout. To a military leader, that plan made no sense. But Joshua didn't argue. He didn't try to modify the plan or look for a smarter way. He trusted God completely and led the people to do the same. That act of obedience, strange as it was, led to one of the most famous victories in the Bible. The walls of Jericho didn't fall because of Israel's strength, but because they did exactly what God asked, exactly how he asked it. It's easy to look back at that story and admire Joshua's faith, but imagine how hard it must have been in the moment. Picture thousands of soldiers walking silently around the city walls while the enemy watched from above, possibly mocking them. Day after day, nothing happened. No sign of progress, no cracks in the wall, just walking and waiting. That kind of obedience requires not just faith, but humility and patience. Joshua had to lead the people through a process that didn't look like victory until the very last moment, and yet he never wavered. He reminded the people to trust God, to stay the course, and to believe that the outcome didn't depend on human logic, but on divine power. That's what made Joshua a great leader. Not that he had all the answers, but that he knew who did. His obedience became the bridge between God's promise and the people's victory. What we learn from Joshua is that obedience isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it looks like doing something that doesn't make sense to the world. Sometimes it means waiting longer than we'd like, or doing something that seems too small to matter. But Joshua's story reminds us that obedience, even in the smallest things, can open the door to miracles. When we follow God's lead, even when we don't understand it, he shows up in ways we never imagined. The victory at Jericho wasn't just about conquering a city. It was about proving that faith in action leads to breakthrough. It's a lesson we all need, especially in times when life feels stuck or hopeless. Maybe the battle isn't ours to fight in the usual way. Maybe our job is to walk in faith, follow God's voice, and trust that He knows exactly what He's doing. Joshua's obedience didn't just change the outcome of a battle. It set the tone for the entire conquest of the Promised Land. And if we're willing to follow with the same trust, who knows what walls might fall in our lives too. Joshua was undoubtedly a strong and fearless warrior, but what made him truly stand out was not just his ability to lead armies, it was his heart. While he could stand firm in battle and make hard decisions under pressure, he also showed deep compassion for the people he led. He didn't rule with an iron fist. He listened, he cared, and he tried to understand the struggles of those around him. Joshua wasn't removed from the community, he was part of it. He walked alongside the people, shared their burdens, and made it a point to respond to their needs with patience and grace. Even in moments of discipline or correction, like in the case of Achan's sin, his actions came from a place of wanting to protect the whole nation, not out of personal pride or anger. His leadership style reminds us that true strength is not just about how loudly we speak or how many battles we win. It's about knowing when to fight and when to listen, when to act and when to offer mercy. Throughout the conquest of Canaan, Joshua had plenty of reasons to become hardened or disconnected. He witnessed betrayal, fear, and rebellion. He had to deal with difficult personalities and moments where the people doubted not only him, but also God. And yet, he stayed steady. He carried the weight of leadership without letting it crush his character. When the Israelites entered the Promised Land, one of the first things he did was re-establish important spiritual practices, circumcision, and the Passover. These acts weren't just religious rituals. They were ways of helping the people reconnect with their identity and their relationship with God. Joshua knew that leading a nation was not just about winning territory, it was about guiding hearts. His leadership was full of moments that showed his care for the people's spiritual health just as much as their physical safety. He never let the mission overshadow the people themselves. In a world that often celebrates power and dominance, Joshua's example challenges us to lead differently. His life shows us that compassion doesn't weaken leadership, it strengthens it. When people feel seen, heard, and valued, they're more willing to follow and trust. Joshua didn't demand loyalty. He earned it. And he earned it not just by being brave, but by being kind. That kind of balance is rare, but deeply needed, whether in families, workplaces, churches, or communities. You don't have to be in charge of an army to lead like Joshua. You just need to care enough to listen, to serve, and to lead with both courage and empathy. That's what made Joshua a powerful leader, not just his victories in battle, but the quiet strength of his compassion. His story reminds us that leadership isn't about control, it's about care. And when strength is guided by love, it becomes a force that truly transforms. After the battles were won and the major enemies defeated, Joshua faced a completely different kind of challenge, dividing the Promised Land among the 12 tribes of Israel. At first glance, this might seem like a routine administrative task, but to Joshua and the people, it was far more than that. This wasn't just land, it was the fulfillment of a promise made generations ago to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Every boundary line, every assigned territory carried deep spiritual meaning. Joshua didn't approach the process with political ambition or personal bias. He involved the priest Eleazar and tribal leaders, and they cast lots to determine the division, a practice rooted in seeking God's will rather than human preference. For the Israelites, this wasn't a game of chance. It was a sacred method to ensure that each tribe received what God intended for them. Through this process, Joshua showed once again that he led with reverence and responsibility, placing God's authority above his own. As each tribe received its portion of land, it became clear how much thought and care had gone into the distribution. The land was not handed out randomly. It considered the size, needs, and history of each tribe. Some tribes, like Judah and Ephraim, received larger portions due to their size and leadership roles, while others, like Simeon, shared territory within another tribe's borders. Even in cases where disputes or concerns arose, Joshua addressed them with fairness, always returning to what God had spoken. One notable example is when Caleb, Joshua's old comrade, requested the hill country of Hebron as his inheritance. Joshua honored the request, not because of favoritism, but because Caleb's faith had earned him that right long ago. These decisions weren't made in boardrooms. They were made with prayer, reflection, and deep awareness of their spiritual significance. For Joshua, this was not the end of the journey, but the beginning of Israel settling into God's promise, and he took that responsibility to heart. The way Joshua handled the land division still holds powerful lessons for us today. We often rush through milestones in life, job promotions, financial gains, reaching goals without stopping to acknowledge their deeper meaning. Joshua reminds us that some moments, especially those that fulfill long-awaited hopes, deserve to be approached with gratitude, humility, and purpose. He didn't treat the land as a trophy of war, but as a gift from God to be stewarded wisely. That mindset turned a logistical task into a spiritual act. It also helped shape Israel's identity for generations to come, setting the foundation for justice, order, and community. Joshua didn't just lead people into victory, he led them into legacy. And that legacy began with recognizing that even in moments of peace and prosperity, we still need to seek God, honor His promises, and handle His blessings with care. In doing so, we not only receive what He gives, we learn how to live in it well. As Joshua neared the end of his life, he wasn't concerned with his own legacy, wealth, or reputation. He was focused on the spiritual future of his people. After leading the Israelites through decades of battles, victories, and the fulfillment of God's promises, he gathered the nation's leaders one final time at Shechem. There, in a deeply emotional and powerful speech, Joshua recounted everything God had done for them, from the call of Abraham to the crossing of the Jordan and the fall of Jericho. It wasn't just a history lesson. Joshua was reminding the people that they hadn't arrived at the promised land by their own strength or cleverness, but because of God's unwavering faithfulness. And with that truth fresh in their hearts, he challenged them with a decision. Choose this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua 24:15. That declaration wasn't just personal. It was a line in the sand, calling the entire nation to take ownership of their faith. The people responded with enthusiasm, pledging to follow the Lord and reject all other gods. But Joshua, ever wise and realistic, didn't let them make that promise lightly. He warned them of the seriousness of their commitment and reminded them that God is holy and just, that their loyalty couldn't be shallow or conditional. To seal the covenant, Joshua wrote their words in the book of the law and set up a large stone as a witness, so that future generations would remember that moment. This wasn't just about one emotional gathering, it was about setting a spiritual anchor for the years to come. Joshua understood that faith is not something passed down automatically. It has to be chosen, lived out, and protected. Even after all he had done as a military leader and national figure, Joshua knew that the most important battle wasn't against external enemies, but against forgetfulness and spiritual drift. That's why he ended his life not with a sword in his hand, but with a call to worship, a call to remember, and a call to remain faithful. Joshua's final challenge is just as relevant today as it was back then. We live in a world full of distractions, options, and voices pulling us in every direction. It's easy to lose sight of what really matters, or to treat faith like a side note instead of a foundation. But Joshua's story reminds us that faith isn't just something we declare, it's something we live. Like him, we're all given moments where we have to decide. Who will we serve? What values will guide our home? What legacy will we leave behind? Maybe you're a parent trying to raise kids in a noisy world, or a young adult trying to find purpose, or someone facing uncertainty about the future. Joshua's life reminds us that leadership, in any form, begins with devotion. His words, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," aren't just a quote for a plaque on the wall. They're a daily decision. And when we choose to serve with integrity and faith like Joshua did, we don't just change our own path, we impact generations. That's the power of a life fully surrendered.